So, Singapore's economy is absolutely booming. I mean, growth is at a record high and inflation seems to be under control. So, why does it feel like so many Singaporeans are being left behind? We're going to unpack this economic paradox and try to find out what's really going on behind those big headline numbers.
And there it is, right? That's the heart of the paradox, put perfectly by Sean Lowe, who used to be Singapore's budget director. His words get right to the core of this disconnect that a lot of people are feeling. So we're going to dig into his insider take on why this is happening and maybe what could be done about it.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, you have to understand there's this tale of two economies playing out. You have the one you see in the data, and then you have the one people are actually feeling in their day-to-day lives.
All right, let's start with the numbers on paper. In 2025, Singapore's economy grew by a really impressive 4.8%. And with inflation sitting below 1%, what's not to love? I mean, by any standard measure, that's a fantastic result for the nation, right?
But here's the real question, the one Sean Lowe puts on the table. Do you, or do the businesses you see around you, actually feel almost 5% better off? And for a lot of people, the answer is a pretty clear no. And that feeling is the mystery we're here to solve.
So, how do we solve this? Well, first we need to get how the national budget actually works. It's not just about quick fixes for today. It's more like a long game, planting seeds for growth that you won't actually see harvested for years down the line.
You know, Sean Lowe has this great analogy for his old job. He says being budget director is like being a stage manager. It's this year-long marathon of planning and coordination to put on the best show possible for the whole country.
Okay, so let's break down what's actually in the budget. On one side, you've got the stuff you feel almost immediately. You know, things like CDC vouchers, those are basically spending credits for the community, and tax rebates. That's money in your pocket right now. But on the other side, you have these huge long-term investments, things like the Future Energy Fund and consistent defense spending that are building the foundation for a prosperous future.
And this quote really nails it. The strong growth we're seeing today isn't because of something that happened last month. It's the result of strategic decisions that were made years, maybe even a decade ago. It's all about that compounding effect, where each budget builds on the last one to create this really strong foundation.
Okay, so we've got the paradox, and we know how the budget is a long game. Now let's get to the real heart of it. Where is this disconnect between the growth numbers and how people are feeling actually coming from?
So it turns out a huge piece of that 4.8% growth, it's coming from one single powerhouse sector, manufacturing. As you can see, it makes up a solid 20% of the whole GDP. So why isn't everyone feeling that boost?
Well, here's the kicker. Just look at who's actually working in manufacturing. Turns out it's less than 10% of the Singaporean workforce. So you've got this one sector just crushing it, driving up the national numbers. But the vast majority of local workers, they're not really getting a piece of that action directly.
So who are the people not really feeling this growth? Well, it breaks down into two main groups. You've got workers in other sectors that aren't growing as fast, and you have a growing population of retirees who are no longer in the workforce at all. All right, so now that we've kind of pinpointed the problem, let's switch gears and talk about solutions. How can policy and future budgets actually help to bridge this economic gap? And, the good thing is this isn't a crisis. The economy is strong. The challenge now is really about being proactive, about rethinking how to share the success that's already there more broadly across the board.
So what do we do? How do you support workers when things are changing so fast, especially with AI coming in? Sean Lowe lays out this pretty clear three-step plan. First, just assume disruption is the new normal. Second, give companies a real incentive to hire workers who've been displaced. And third, focus on practical retraining that happens on the job, not in a classroom.
And that last point, it's a real game changer. The old way of thinking, just go back to school, is often way too slow for today's world. By the time you finish a formal course, that skill might already be evolving. The future is about learning and retraining right there, on the job, in real time.
But hey, job programs are just one piece of the puzzle. If you really want to shape the future, you have to look at the tax system itself.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to think about it. The tax code is like a country's DNA. It's not just about collecting revenue. It's a statement about what a society values, what it wants to encourage, and what it wants to discourage.
So how could you use that to tackle something like wealth inequality? Well, one idea that's on the table is getting a lot more specific with property taxes, maybe focusing more on non-owner occupied properties, the ones people hold as investments, not as their own home.
And all of this really leads us to the big final question. You know, this whole paradox, it isn't just a Singapore thing. It's a challenge that successful economies all over the world are facing. As our nations get richer, the real work begins, figuring out how to make sure that prosperity is shared by everyone. So what's the best way to do that? That's a conversation we all need to be part of.